And I remember one of my buddies said, man, Chapman, do you ever just sometimes stop talking and listen, to what God's saying? I said, you mean like, Stephen Curtis Chapman be speechless?
CCM! Well, we're here celebrating Speechless. It is this very diverse record. There is sadness in this record. There is heartbreak in this record. I think in our heads, we kind of put Dive as that.
Yeah, as think of it as the Dive album.
Yeah, the Dive album. And it's really not.
Yeah.
It really has this arc. I mean, it starts with Dive, but then it ends with, Be Still. So for me, this is not necessarily my first introduction to you. Obviously, I'd heard The Great Adventure and those things. That's 1999. I'm 14, and the Dive hits.
Yeah.
And that's when I'm connected to this music in a way that I had not been before. Did you feel that was happening, that you were getting introduced to a whole new era of fans?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was part of what was really special about this record and this music. And some of that was, on purpose, trying to, one of the things I've always said, that was important for me through the years is just staying a student of current music. Music is it's a language, and it I feel like there's a certain dialect, of what people are speaking at the time, particularly with pop music, with music that's most culturally, relevant to the times, and I've lived long enough now musically and made enough music that, guitars, there was a time when, man, guitars were cool. And then there was a time when guitars weren't nearly as cool, and it was like keyboards, and it was,
I like the guitar time.
Yeah. I'm a guitar fan, and so my challenge was always, I would listen to music, and whatever was kind of happening, whatever were the big pop songs of the moment, they would they kind of follow these trends, and there's when it is crank up the amp and it's rock and roll, but then you hear things kind of shifting more towards keyboards and synths and programming.
It's pop.
Yeah. And that's where pop music is going. But what I always love to try to do is like, how do I stay true to, because I'm a boy from Kentucky, and there's always a guitar somewhere close by. If you listen to pretty much all of my music, you're going to hear an acoustic guitar in there somewhere in that track, and yet still being able to, by being a student and listening and trying to keep learning what's happening in music, how can I incorporate and keep the organic parts of what make me who I am and who Stephen Curtis Chapman is, and yet incorporate the elements of whatever's happening kind of most, currently in music. And, so Dive was a great example of, for those of us who remember the big Chubbawamba song, I get knocked down, and I get up again, and there's just this kind of chorus where you couldn't help but start bobbing your head and, and you could see everybody was kind of, jumping up and down. And I thought, that's interesting that, that's communicating something to a lot of people, especially kids, especially younger.
I went to go see Chumbawamba live because of that.
Did you?
One song.
That one song. I mean, who knows? Did they ever have another? I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was kind of sweeping, the world. And I thought, okay, now is there any element of that the excitement of that, the energy of that? Because when I wrote the song Dive, the way that song made you feel when you heard it, even if just playing off in the grocery store. I had a guy playing bass for me at the time named Adam Anders, who was like 19 years old when he came to play for me. And he was kind of one of these super freak, talented guys. And I was just fortunate and blessed, and the way God would kind of orchestrate it, that I got to have him when he first came to town, before he would go off to write and produce songs for Backstreet Boys, and then eventually be the guy who masterminded the entire Glee television show. I turned on the TV one night, and Adam Anders is sitting in the seat with Jay Leno, I think was at the time, in the Tonight Show. And he said, I'm like, that's Adam Anders, that's my bass player. And he's like talking about this TV show that's blowing up that he's doing all the music for, called Glee. And so he went on to LA and has made movies. Journey to Bethlehem was his movie that came out recently. Just a brilliant music guy, and now filmmaker, and still a good friend. But Adam was 19 years old and was just in that phase of, there were no rules with what you could do with music. And so he got a bunch of synthesizers and keyboards and guitar pedals and all kinds of stuff, and just started I said, here's a song, played him on the guitar, Dive, and I said, go make it cool. Make it what you would create around that.
Which for an artist, by the way, for you to have that kind of trust of a 19-year-old is pretty wild. 10 years in to be like, you know what? I'm clear-headed enough to know that this is going to help.
Yeah. And he did. I mean, and I give so much credit to Adam and my entire band, because what was unique about that record, Speechless, and I remember going into my record label and telling them, I want to use my live band on this record. I want to use my guys that I've been on the road with. They've been in the trenches with me. And that just wasn't something that artists did very much. And so part of what makes that record so special is I had Randy Pierce playing guitar. Randy, hadn't played on a lot of records, but he's a monster guitar player. And I had Adam doing all the programming and then playing bass on it. And Will Denton playing drums, who was just this, just wild man on drums, and took all that energy, took it in the studio around these songs. And it was something very, very special that happened with that album.
Were you able to, at this point in your career, essentially tell the label, hey, this is what we're doing musically? Because I'm sure there was some, not concern. I wouldn't say that this is where you wanted to go. But like you said, it's a pretty big jump from the last record to then kicking off with Dive.
Yeah. It was definitely, I think at that point, I had earned enough, trust from them or whatever that Peter York was able to go, all right, well, if that's what you're thinking, let's try it. Now, to be fair, I had Brown Bannister at the helm.
I was about to say, who produced this record?
Legend, Brown Bannister. So Brown was all in on the idea too. He felt he was very excited about it.
He's a good salesman for it.
So that helped a lot. I think, Peter had a great trust in Peter York, had a great trust in Brown. So they felt like, if this isn't working, we'll know quickly. But thankfully, it more than worked. It was kind of magic.
I looked at your history and the discography, and pretty much every year, there was like 9 years or even more so of new music coming out. And then there's a gap before Speechless. So what was going on there for the, 3 years that led up to this record? Because there's a pretty big jump.
Yeah. That's a good question. I had done the Signs of Life record, and that was a real shift musically a bit for me. I think I leaned really heavily into some of my love for blues and, swampy, there was some people called it swamp gospel. Stephen Curtis goes swamp gospel. It's just some of the stuff that I was influenced by as a kid. But so that record, toured it. And then I think there was that was in the day. Some of us are old enough to remember greatest hits albums. They still sort of do them now, but streaming and all that, you just go make your own greatest hits.
Create a playlist.
That? And so we did a greatest hits, kind of a 10-year, retrospective looking back. And that's when I went to Abbey Road and did some live recordings in the Beatles room at Abbey Road. I mean, just stuff that was like, whose life am I living? Am I really getting to record in the Beatles room at Abbey Road? And so I think all of that was kind of happening on the heels of the Signs of Life record and tour. So maybe that's some of what was going on during that time.
Oswald Chambers stuff was happening.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I got very, very interested in My Utmost for His Highest and Oswald Chambers. I'd read it for years, but I started researching and I read his book, Abandoned to God, about his life and the life of Oswald Chambers. Found out that he had a daughter that was actually still living in London while I was there recording in the Abbey Road in Abbey Road studios. I actually got to go visit Kathleen Chambers, his daughter, which was crazy.
I've seen that. That's like a
captured
video.
Captured that on video. We had a crew with us, so maybe there was a moment while we were looking back over our shoulder, celebrating that, kind of catch your breath, and then there's always that. What's the next thing? What's the next music going to be? What's the next record? I remember when I started writing songs for Speechless, I was visiting, I remember, with my pastor, Scotty Smith, who's walked through, so many seasons of my music and ministry. And we're just talking about, how, at this point, in my life, my career, family, there's so much going on. How do we stay just fresh in just being amazed at the grace of God? I've been singing Amazing Grace my whole life, but is it possible? How do I keep hold of how amazing it is?
What does it really mean now?
Yeah. And not just kind of be, well, let me write another song, about how great, God's love is that I knew from 2 years ago, but am I keeping that in my own life really fresh? I remember him saying this phrase, gospel astonishment. He's like, that's the thing for me. He said, in my whole journey, it's like, how do I stay freshly just astonished at how good the gospel is, that God loved us enough that, put on Jesus what we deserved and gave us, what we could never deserve and earn, and just the message of the gospel. And he called it gospel astonishment. And I was like, man, I think that is the theme of my life right now. And I want to keep writing songs about that. And then I was with some friends, and I remember I was just talking about all these thoughts and ideas and wrestling with this and questioning that and this. And I remember one of my buddies said, man, Chapman, do you ever just sometimes stop talking and just be quiet, just be still and listen, to what God's saying? And it was a kind, loving kind of rebuke, because I was just going. And
that guy. You're the guy.
And I was like,
it down.
I said, you mean like, Stephen Curtis Chapman be speechless, and in the context of what Scotty and I had been talking about, it was like that word suddenly was kind of like, that's it. That's the word, speechless. How do I keep returning back to that place? My wife laughed when I told her I was writing a song called Speechless, because she's known me to be anything but speechless.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
Yeah, she's like, oh, funny. Yeah, you speechless? Right. That's never going to happen.
You're like, don't worry. The first track, not that speechless. We'll get there. But
yeah, we're going to get there. Yeah. The whole theme of that album really started at that point, where with just, what are the things in, my life? And what I didn't know as I kind of first started the record is that I was going to, encounter some things that would, on the other end of being speechless with just sadness and hard things in life. And the song With Hope would come out of writing a song for friends of ours who had lost their daughter, very dear friends, who, we would walk through that with them many years before they would in turn come in and put their arms around us and walk us through that same valley of the shadow of death. And so much of that album there was so much life, joy, pain, all of that into that record, that I got to pour into that the first time around. And so anyway, the opportunity to kind of revisit all that album meant then and has meant over the years has been an incredible blessing.
It's almost a concept record.
Yeah.
Beginning to end.
Yeah. And that's what, my boys, Caleb and Will Franklin, their band Colony House, we talk a lot about this because, Caleb like, Dad, that's the kind of music I grew up watching you make records and make albums that were a whole arc. It's like a book, you don't just go to chapter 14. Now it can stand alone, songs can, but they make the most sense in the context of the whole picture. And that's how we got to make music then. And some still do. And Caleb tries to, is like, but man, it's so hard because everybody just listen to songs and pick a song out. And, but that's what I loved so much about that. I got to be a part of that era of music. Albums like Speechless might not have ever been made in a day and time like this because, there was this idea of how it starts and where it flows and where it goes. And you can, every song doesn't have to be, a 3-minute single, it's like that you can go places in that context.
You have Dive and Hope.
Yeah.
And you have that with Hope on.
Yeah.
And can we talk a little bit about With Hope? Because I think in listening to the whole record last night, I'm listening to it, I'm enjoying it, and then that comes in, and it's the gut punch of the record.
Yeah. Oh.
And I maybe just didn't remember it. It didn't have the impact it does on me now as a dad and have kids in school and everything that's happening. And then the fact that the story behind it is oddly still, sadly, so relevant. It's not like we're 25 years out and, that's old news.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to know your thoughts on that now when you're working on performing these songs live.
Yeah.
That's got to be hitting different.
One of the first school shootings happened in Paducah, in my high school, where I went to high school and graduated, Heath High School. And my dad, who has his music store still at 87, still teaches guitar lessons in Paducah. All of the students who were killed in that shooting were students of his, were guitar students of his. So he knew them. He knew the families. I was asked to come be a part of the funeral services. And then we actually did a big concert, kind of a tribute concert at Heath High School during that time. So that was obviously very, very impactful for me. Then after being with friends one evening, watching a football game together, a small group that we had from church, we were on our way home from that. And some friends of ours left ahead of us, and we got home, and about 45 minutes later, got a call that the mom and two daughters were being rushed to Vanderbilt Hospital. They'd been hit by a car on their way home, just kind of in the side as they were going across an intersection, and they didn't even know if they were going to survive it. And I got in my car, headed down to Vanderbilt, and their oldest daughter, Erin Mulligan, did not survive the crash. Thankfully, mom and the other daughter did. And so we just, we were with them for days and the weeks to come, and just praying and through the recovery, and the Mulligan family, Ray and Lori Mulligan. And so they just became very, very dear to us through that time. And that song actually on the record, and I forgot about this until I was listening through it with some guys talking about putting this together and what, are we going to use and how do we do the segues? And so we're just listening through the whole record, and I get to that song and hear Erin, we found a recording of her singing Jesus Loves Me at the beginning, and I'm just like undone because I haven't listened to that.
Has it been on the set? Has it been something you've played recently at all?
I
So you're
have
having
not.
to revisit
The last
these moments.
time is what's crazy is the last time that I really remember, hearing and listening to with Hope, was actually at Maria's memorial service. We had that song. Jeff Moore, my best friend, sang that song with Hope at Maria's memorial. Fingerprints of God, I wrote for Emily when she was 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. That song was written for her because she looked at herself in the mirror and looked ugly and thought she was fat and didn't look like the girls in the magazine picture.
It wasn't our magazine.
And
I was making sure. It
yeah,
wasn't.
no, not at all. No, certainly wasn't.
I was like, oh
CCM
no,
Magazine.
oh no, they're
it
calling
was
us
not,
out.
not at all.
No.
But that song now, I'm singing that song, and Emily is 39, 38, 39 years old, and she is a mother of three of the most beautiful, amazing young ladies. She has gone on to, basically be the heart and soul, she and her mom, of the work of Show Hope, that's helped now, almost 10,000 families bring children from 63 countries. I mean, when I sang, I see the fingerprints of God on you, I saw it, but now I'm singing, looking back, going, look at what God has used your life to do and impact the lives of, she's meeting with, she told me last night, I'm meeting with, the first lady of, and this contingent of
No big
people
deal,
pushing forward the adoption advocacy in our nation's capital in a couple of weeks. I'm going to go do that. It's like you see the things that God has done in her life, and I go back and sing, I can see the fingerprints of God when I look at you. I'm like, see, told you, I was singing it long before, anybody even got it. But yeah, songs like that.
Is your family happy that you're revisiting this record? Because I'm sure maybe that one you're like,
ecstatic.
She could be like, oh, come on, Dad.
No, she loves it. She's like, Dad, I love that you're going to sing that song, and songs. I'm thinking like, Great Expectations, gosh, so many of those that are like, to look back 25 years later and just see, so many of the lyrics of those songs are like, even bigger than I imagined when I wrote them, and even better. And, when you mentioned, Be Still and Know, and some of those are just, there's so much to those stories. I wrote that song with Caleb sitting beside me on an airplane on the way to Africa, and I wanted to strangle him and duct tape him in the bathroom because he couldn't sit still and he was spilling his drinks everywhere. And we had like 2 Sprites on us, and, a flight to Africa is like, weeks long, it feels like. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to survive this flight. And I open up my Bible and I read, Be Still and Know that I am God. And I write that song sitting on an airplane beside my 9-year-old son, Caleb, who's now is my favorite songwriter on the planet. And in fact, he came back and did a version of that song with me. And I'm hopeful that maybe somewhere on this tour, I can get him to come out and sing it with me. So, it'll be very cool to celebrate moments like that, just to remember,
Yeah, I'm excited that you decided to look back, because that is something that when we acquired CCM and started working on this, is we said, we want to make sure we're always, looking forward. There's always the future of what's coming, but to make sure that we at least plant a foot back at what got us here. There has to be that. And sure, this is 25 years of a much longer career, but we are really dedicated when it comes to the sort of revamp of this magazine, because we know what these songs mean to people. And I think that in conversations I've had, whether it's with the Audio Adrenaline guys or whoever it may be, where it's like, yeah, let's also remind people this was a lot of fun. We had a really good time.
Yeah.
In the late 90s and the early 2000s, it's sad and dramatic, but sort of that pre-9/11 world where Christian music and Christian rock had hit such a pinnacle that, sure, can we all look back on questionable clothes decisions? Can we all look back on questionable hairstyles?
Maybe.
What got you to say, let's do this? Because it's not like you've done it for your other records. You haven't done the full look back.
Yeah.
And it is, sure, Dive is a huge hit, Speech is a huge hit, but you could have easily done this for The Great Adventure. You could have easily done this for anything.
Yeah. I don't know if it's, just the alignment of the planets, everything just kind of, there've been different things at different seasons of, well, this is kind of what seems like the right thing to do right now. And I had watched in the last few years, I'm at that point, and music is at that point, the music I love, that you start realizing you're going back and seeing these artists who are doing the anniversary tours. I got to see Huey Lewis do Sports record, entire record from start to finish, and sadly, he can't hear and sing, and he's had to stop touring. I got to see that tour, and it was one of my favorite musical moments because that record, influenced me, inspired me in so many ways. And to get to hear that whole record, you go get to hear the hits, you'll hear, a couple of those, but you don't hear the whole record. And just the memories of, man, I remember what's coming next and the transition. It goes to that next song and just where that takes you.
And how you're going to interpret it. I mean, how you're going to make things different. Because in 25 years, voices change, things move, keys change.
Well, thankfully,
still good.
Thankfully, we're really, really close. Now, we might drop the key of a few of those songs because they were too high when I recorded them, even, and that was all artists laugh about that. It's like, why do we record? We get in the studio, we get jacked up on adrenaline. It's like, no, let's go key higher, it's like, yeah. And then you got to sing it, 10, 5
forever.
nights in a row, and you go, what was I thinking? So we may have adjusted the keys on a few of these, but part of what I'm really, really excited about with this tour, because when I started thinking about doing it, and when I saw I saw the Eagles do Hotel California, I saw Huey Lewis do this, and I just thought, someday, what would be the album, if I was going to do it, what would be the right album to do that with? And I thought, well, Speechless would be the one, because, you mentioned there was like 7 songs that found their way to the top of the charts, and so there's a lot of familiarity with a lot of those songs, and even the deep cuts, as I go back and play, I'm like, man, every one of these songs are so meaningful for me. And I've heard stories from people over the years of how much they meant to them. And so I just thought this would be the right album to do.
Do you listen to any of it and go, I wish I could change this? Are you that kind of person in terms of your songwriting? Or do you listen to it 25 years later and go, it is what it is, I left it? Because I know that there's part of me that would probably go back and go,
I can honestly say, with that record especially, that there's not any part of it that I think, I would have changed that. I'm really grateful for that. But I go back and like, how can I just recapture that excitement? And one of the things, because that record was so laced together with orchestral music and with these beautiful, incredible string arrangements recorded in the, B room at Abbey Road, where we were like in the room where the day before, I was telling somebody today that, I walked in and it was still set up from a session the day before. And I was like, who was in here yesterday? You're in Abbey Road Studios in London, England. You're getting ready to record with the London Symphony. And they said, oh yeah, John Williams was in here yesterday doing the latest Star Wars soundtrack.
That would time, right?
Yeah. And I was like, what? And so I was like, I'm just going to sit in this room and try to soak up some of the, some of the John Williams.
That, so I understand.
Yeah. So, so it was like, how amazing is this? I'm going to get to do it. But how do you recapture that? So I'm like, well, man, I gotta have string players on this tour, but I can't, it's crazy to think to
Some
do that.
accountant's going, okay, I don't know.
So I was like, okay, I've got a band. I've got some Randy Pierce who played on the original record and played on the original tour, coming out, and Brent Milligan, who's been with me for many, many years, as my bass player and producer, and then Garrett Tyler and Danny Lopez, who are a couple of guys from For King and Country band who are helping me put all this together. And so I think we're going to be able to pull this off. I'm pretty excited about it.
I love that you brought back an original, person in the band and that kind of thing too. Because my wife and I, we just went and saw Oasis did their reunion, and it's just the two of them.
Yeah.
But then they thought, oh, we should bring back the original guitar player, and there was something about having just one more connective piece that was like, oh, it sounds just like it did. Like that's what we were missing here. That's really great. Yeah. And look, it's not just a tour. It's a re-release. There's a lot happening. Around Speechless. We're celebrating Speechless.
Yes.
Yeah. So what else is coming? There is the tour.
Yeah.
There is a vinyl release.
I know.
Which I think
Speechless was never on vinyl.
No, was that gap period where it was no longer cool.
We're bringing back the T-shirt. It's so funny. My mom had my original Speechless T-shirt on recently. I went to visit her, I took a picture with her, and posted on Instagram, and I texted Alex, my manager, and I was like, we got to bring this shirt back. We got to bring it back.
Does the sweater still exist? I saw the video.
Yeah. I don't have the original, to be really honest. I don't even know that I kept the original.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where it's a photo shoot and
someone else
bring a bunch of clothes and they take them when it's over. And I don't know that I ever, that I had
thought
that,
about it,
which I should have, obviously. Knowing what I know now, I should have kept it. But we have gotten a very close, reasonable facsimile.
There you go.
And so we're talking about some fun things that we might even bring back for merch. Yeah. I'm like, do we need a black turtleneck on the merch table? I think we might.
Kind of do.
Speechless.
Maybe there's like a photo op we can all walk up.
Yes, I know. Yeah, exactly. Something. So we'll see. All kinds of fun, silly, goofy, and kind of exciting. I mean, obviously, I got to record this and make this live, version experience available to people. So we're gonna work on that as well.
Now we got to get to some music. I think.
Yeah,
I think we got to hear.
Maybe I should do that.